Добро утро на всички.
Good morning, everyone. Please be seated. Please mute your phones because we don't need to be interrupted. I would like to greet you on behalf of the Energy Management Institute at the second day of our session dedicated to the European Green Deal and the Bulgarian energy transition. Yesterday, we heard some focal topics regarding the Green Deal, and with the participation of Mr. Stankov, Deputy Minister of Energy, to hear more about the visions of the Bulgarian government regarding these processes. Today, I welcome, with pleasure, I might add, Associate Professor Ivanov and Deputy Minister of Economy, Mr. STAMEN YANEV, who is a sort of a speaker today. He will set the framework of today's discussion. And then, within an hour and a half, we will hear some introductory remarks. Mr. Yanev has about an hour for us, and we'll be happy to hear his introductory comments, after which we'll have the opportunity to hear your views. The so-called free discussion will take close to an hour and a half. So please do make sure that your comments are concise, your questions are well formulated. So we are streaming this session, and we have some foreign participants as well. Some of them might like to have their input to the discussion. So now I pass on to the moderator of this session. And I would like him to pay attention to the timelines that we have set. No discrimination, though. I will do my best to keep a strict line set in advance. Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Atanas Georgiev, and I'm the Dean of the Faculty of Economy and Business Administration, University of Sofia. The topic of today's panel is very serious, I might say. I would like to set the discussion in a bit of a different trend. The Bulgarian energy transition in the context of everything that is going on currently in the country. I would like to encourage all online visitors or attendees to ask their question through the Slido webpage 44493. So that we can hear, so to speak, your questions. We have close to 10 interventions. within 3 to 4 minutes, and I hope this time will be sufficient for all speakers to pass their message to the audience, especially their views regarding the Bulgarian energy transition, the responsible institutions, and everything else they consider relevant. What are the boundaries of national decisions in view of the top-down approach of the European Commission? We can discuss this approach, what's the impact on Bulgaria and the region and Southeast Europe, as well as globally. It is also important for us to hear and get some answers on the issue of price. The price of the transition. Yesterday we heard a figure of 43 billion euro. Who will be the investors? Who will be the beneficiaries? And what we need to do in that sense. I will keep this question for later stage, and now I give the floor to the Deputy Minister of Economy, Mr. Stana YANEV. Good morning, everyone. Dear Associate Professor Ivanov, Associate Professor Georgiev, we go a long way with both of you. We've worked on various topics associated with public-private partnerships, but following the timeline, I would like to address all present here, as well as the online attendees. I would like to say that the current conference organized by EMI and the Diplomatic Institute is right on time, while at the same time being a bit in delay, meaning that the issues discussed here are crucial issues. Joining the new team of the new Minister of Economy, Mr. Borisov, Lechezar Borisov, the topic of investments has become even more important in view of the Green Deal that we have to implement ahead of us. All the skills, the knowledge brought by him and by all stakeholders will be very essential in order to transform the economy so that we'll be able to make sure that a large majority, a large percentage of energy capacity in the country is transformed into production meeting the Green Deal requirements. Also, the recent announcement for higher ambitions in order to attain climate neutrality by 2030, 2050 is bringing about disharmony in the business endeavors, and I believe this will be an issue. That's why I would like to emphasize that if we want to see a true effect of the Green Deal, the better part of our sectors will need to transform because the impact will be serious. 13 industrial sites are subject to transformation. They actually add 79% added value to the national economy. I'm sure that my colleagues will give me more details, but to the best of my knowledge, 71% of the major business in Bulgaria as of 2018 will be affected. 20.6 billion euro is the activity, the economic activity. That's what requires us to be united in this endeavor to make sure there is synergy and to overcome the crisis situations that might arise in our path towards meeting the European Commission requirements. Decarbonization is a challenge, and I believe it is no secret for anyone how important they are with respect to Bulgarian economic competitiveness. And on this basis, we need to invest a lot. The second important issue is the need of investments in new technologies, digital technologies, resource-effective technologies. We have a serious potential in this area. In August, if I'm not mistaken, we joined the European Carbon Society because we believe that our experts and stakeholders will take active part in the processes and will make the best of this participation. For sure, we will face a problem with respect to personnel. We need to think of qualification and requalification. And at the same time, we will have absence of qualified staff capable of using high-tech associated with transformation of businesses and manufacturing facilities ensuing from the Green Deal. This created a serious intention to move some of manufacturing facilities outside the EU. Some of our neighbors are not part of the European Union, even if they are in the process of negotiation, and they are doing their game, but it's an opportunity for them. I have been sharing with you some of the issues, but now let me move to the solutions that are possible. First of all, we need to amend legislation in order to incentivize investments, most of all in the area of renewable energy resources. The Ministry of Energy intends to have a separate procedure by the end of the year associated with the so-called green innovations. We also intend to have to allocate 406 million euros to the benefit of achieving the transformation. You realize that the figures are much larger than previously anticipated. In other words, the resources we need are much more. So we need to look for other financial options in order to encourage, to foster cooperation between the business and the government, to consider qualification and requalification of staff. In the last 5 years, being the CEO of the Bulgarian Investment Agency, we have collected innovations, and on that basis, we have proposed a very good formula to have investment plus transformation. Innovations plus investments now has another meaning. It equals a Green Deal. But we need to add another component to this equation. It's about education. Education in various forms. From the mainstream approach, initial, mid, and high education, in other words, university education, until we reach learning, a lifetime learning. So I believe these two components of the equation represent the three basic tiers on which we can build the green future of Bulgaria. It's very hard to predict the future, but we need to start from somewhere. Thank you very much to the organizers for today's session. I am available. I need to hear all your views in order to bring our capacity together and tackle the serious situations we are in. Thank you very much, Mr. YANEV. I just need to mention that this conference had to take place in April, but due to COVID-19, it takes place now. And in this sense, I need to remind every one of you that you need to have face covers and disinfectants as well. Sorry, I missed to mention it earlier. Mr. YANEV made a very interesting input to the session. Investments are of crucial importance, but the greening the economy is the future. And I believe the Deputy Minister's words shape the smooth transition to the next speaker. And it's about resources, no fossil fuel use. Mr. Zagorov and Mr. Alexandrov, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this meeting. I'd rather say this is an effort for us to be together to discuss the new topics. These topics are imminent. You can see that immediately after the executive branch, a representative of the trade unions is taking floor. Therefore, we are at the phase of decision-making. And if these decisions are hard to take, we have to decide on the way ahead. I have two options. One is to keep silent for 4 or 5 minutes because everything is clear, or to make a few points, which I opt for, to state my opinions. I work in several areas. One is safety at work, safety and health at work. The council that I am part of in this respect has worked continuously. This is because its operation cannot be suspended. So we have to hear what is being said. We have to say what we need to say. We have to be in a continuous dialogue. We should not just listen to each other. We should have a dialogue. There should be a two-way communication, and that communication should be active. Let me flash back. About 30 years ago, I had to develop my diploma paper. I am a mining engineer. I had to write a thesis on ecology, the link between coal quality and reduction of the emissions from the stacks of thermal power plant Maritz Istok. It was state-owned enterprise. We had achieved certain success, and with my diploma paper, with my thesis, thanks to the efforts of the people that helped me, we have shown that the more we work on the quality of coal at mining, the lower the price of that coal. And this work was used to change the pricing of coal. But that was a very long time ago. So willy-nilly, I had been involved with the environmental protection topic, with the ecology topic, for a very long period of time. So we have helped enhance the process of streamlining the process of generation of the mining of coal. Now, a few points I'd like to make. The first one is that the energy sector is at a state of burnout. This is a state when you have overworked, you cannot respond with what is required from you. It is not that people in the energy sector do not work properly, but this is just like a person that is affected by burnout. Burnout is a common phenomenon among physicians, teachers. Unfortunately, from the burnout moment onwards, the life of a person is very hard. The same is true for the systems that have been subjected to a burnout. We're talking about the energy sector here. What will happen there? Can we recover it? There are ways. We'll make our efforts to achieve that. Another thing that is obvious is that we have infrastructure now. We have government documents, and there is new infrastructure that is being built. But it is not obvious that there is a transition. There are no clues in this respect. If we are talking about what efforts the Bulgarian energy companies will have to make, we're talking about coal. Here, the efforts will have to be increased. Employment will not decline there. Also, the greening of society, of economy, come with a lot of investments. These investments need people to translate them to actual operational sites and facilities. We will not release manpower from the energy sector. Nothing suggests that. Still, the labor market will be under pressure because new capacities, new facilities will be built. There will be manpower required. Transport, if transport is changed with electromobility, we will have certain miracles that will happen, and we will need more manpower. So there will be burnout in other systems, and there will be a clash in this respect. There will be unexpected situations like the medical staff, which is working continuously ever since the pandemic broke out. Additional money is given to the physicians, but the funds do not guarantee better outcomes. Our physicians and medical staff, medical professionals work for 10, for 20, for 14 hours, but there is no guarantee that matters are improved. If we go into the detail regarding reskilling, we don't have sufficient training centers. We don't have sufficient trainers. We need a lot of preparation. It is quite offensive for a person if you tell them you will not be a coal miner now, you will be a welder. He may not want to be a welder. We should be able to provide options to people to choose what they would like to do in the future. We should not impose jobs and positions on them. The energy sector is the area which will least be affected by the transition. Many other areas of our lives will be changed to a large extent. I'm not sure whether the other systems will these other systems are prepared for this change. The trade unions are quite stable as a structure. They can be used, not ignored. They can be used as partners, because if workers and employees in general are represented by the trade unions, we have a very important role to play. We do represent them quite well, and we are faced with hard times. We need to take this into account. Several years ago, some time ago, a U.S. president said that the moral dimension of our time is equal to war. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Zagorov. Dear colleagues, if you have more items to discuss, you can add them during the discussion. I'll step in with a comment regarding education. Indeed, a lot of work has to be performed. We cannot expect that we may say to the miners that you have to do this or that. Incentives have to be provided, incentives both for the people and for the businesses in the sector. We're talking about a transition linked to the Green Deal. Until recently, we were part of another transition from planned to market economy. In some sectors, this transition has not yet been completed, particularly in the minds of some people. So at certain points of time, we expect more from the state and less from our own efforts. We rely on compulsory measures rather than incentives. But this can be part of our discussion. Before we continue with Mr. Anton Ivanov, member of the Management Board of the Bulgarian Energy and Mining Forum. I'd like to make a few points on the review of the plans, national plans on climate and energy. The review of the Commission stated that we still have work to do in the liberalization of the internal markets. Energy poverty is mentioned. We have not properly estimated it. We do not know how many energy poor people we have in Bulgaria and why they are energy poor. So also the European Commission says that we have to analyze the subsidies related to fossil fuels. I don't know if Mr. Ivanov will discuss this, but I'm just raising these issues.
Oh, well, I'm not going to dwell on that, because afterwards we intend to have a discussion. They have already been touched upon in the previous panels, simply because these topics are not new ones. They do not date back from the 14th of October, since the decision of the European Commission for the transition in the economy and the energy sector. We have been talking for years and years, and there is nothing new apart from the absence of a vision where we want to go, what we want to achieve. I would like to talk about this particular situation. It has been for so long for us to talk about the topic and an unforeseeable future, getting ready for it. But I came to the conclusion that the transition somehow has been finalized. At least that's the perception among all the stakeholders. We achieved the stability of the energy system, going through a very difficult period full of turmoil. And now we have a stable, sustainable supplies, moving from a planned economy where supply was granted and guaranteed, and the profits covered the expenses of the profits covered the expenses of the system and the producers. Now we are in a situation where supply is not so strongly guaranteed, and thanks to the relatively warm winters, we haven't suffered supply shortages. But profits do not cover expenses, and the system is still functioning. So the question here is, a system under pressure, but not taking any steps towards its betterment. The steps are very clear that we need to take to improve the system, but nobody wants to take them. This is a very complicated system. And any impact can have a bifurcation. Any intervention may have a bifurcation impact. So for that reason, for a very long time, we have been hesitating market liberalization measures, which is an essential step towards liberalizing the market. In the integrated plan, we have a very important topic. set out capacity mechanisms. It's not precisely the mechanism that has been developed there in the plan. This is a very tedious procedure, and realistically, it doesn't need to be done. At the same time, we speak about investments to generate capacities in the vicinity of billions that need to happen with the participation of the Bulgarian energy holding. But the steps undertaken, in fact, eliminate the possibility for the companies in this holding to be active actors in the investment process. They can be observers only. We know very well what needs to be done, but whatever action is undertaken independently, it would lead to a chaos instead of improvement. So anyone faced with such a dilemma, nobody wants to do it. In other words, as Americans say, not in my shift. So we need to realize that without the energy sector, economy cannot exist or hardly can exist. But our energy sector, the way we know it, is no longer the one that it used to be. And here the question would be, how are we going to tackle the reality in order to make things easier for us? Out of the entire economic sector, as per the data of the National Statistic Institute, the energy of a single person operate the largest share of economy. So when we speak about releasing people, we are talking about depriving ourselves from assets. We have 31,000 employees in a business. Such an enterprise manages funds in the vicinity of billions. Just take care of these figures. Thank you, Mr. Ivanov. Assets and people. Probably I need to mention that due to the state involvement and state ownership in the energy sector being that high, we are facing some of the issues. The Ministry of Energy itself is sort of in an imbalanced position because some support the traditional approach and others the liberalized approach. Thank you very much for your intervention. And now I hope that the energy business will comment on the issues. Mr. Stanislav Ivanov, CEO of Ovagas Mreži AD. He represents an entity that is an active participant in the energy sector. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Georgiev. I had the opportunity while coming here to listen online. Congratulations to EMI for coping with the new realities, because I listened to the start of the session online while traveling to here. Let me start with a sickness, a metaphor that has been a topic since the initiation of the transition. The excessive loss of primary energy. I believe that we all present here are aware what I'm talking about. For any effective kilowatt energy behind this, there are numerous losses. So the common thing between what we produce and what we lose is actually the CO2 emission, or rather emissions that are emitted in the final to have a final program. With respect to electricity, in Bulgaria, in the energy mix, 42% account for local production. In fact, in such a mix in electricity generation and such a high percentage loss of primary energy, close to 80% loss. So any kilowatt hour, we have a huge amount of loss. And harmful emissions are inevitable. Actually, these figures indicate the direct gasification to the end users means we can save close to 65% of CO2 emissions generated during power production or power generation. I will formulate a statement. Gasification in Bulgaria can support and help the Bulgarian economy to reach close to 90%, I would say minimum 90% of the Green Deal requirements. Household consumption comes to 1,000 cubic meters, which gives a figure to 10.6 megawatt hour per year. And the savings under the recognized methodologies applied in the country come to 20 megawatt hours. Any household with gasification available saves 3 kilowatt hours. If we assume that in Bulgaria for 10 years we can provide gasification to 700,000 households, then we can say that this actually removes the need of having a new 2,000 megawatt per hour capacity, the new capacity that was mentioned yesterday. We need to think about synergies without damaging competitiveness. Let me repeat again. If we consider the structure of primary energy generation, the household consumption and direct household gasification, I believe that this formula is a recipe to first avoid losses and meet the Green Deal requirements. Let me conclude with the following. Natural gas is not a panacea, but I'm not the only one that can prove that the carbon-intensive economy and the low carbon economy goes through gasification. I have prepared a couple of slides that, should you need important, I can share with you. Thank you very much, Mr. Ivanov. Energy efficiency and the gross energy consumption are touched upon in the report that we mentioned. Bulgaria needs to be more ambitious. Let's move on with another perspective, the perspective of the most affected regions. Ms. Rumiana Grozeva, Managing Director of Regional Economic Development Agency of Stara Zagora. I hope we will hear another view of the actually affected region. How does this transition look like from the perspective of the local stakeholders?
Thank you. Good morning, dear colleagues. First of all, I'd like to thank EMI for this opportunity for the regional level to present its view. So far, the regions as such have rarely had the opportunity to say what is taking place on the ground. Let me say in a couple of words what the Regional Economic Development Agency is. It's an NGO. We have as members 7 out of the 11 municipalities of Stara Zagora. 25 years ago, the agency has been set up and it has been recognized as a partner on an international level for the implementation of various regional projects. Since 2018, the European Commission approved a project for 1.8 million euro. We are the lead partner, the only Bulgarian organization in the whole program. Our partners are Germany, Poland, Slovenia, Spain, Denmark, regions and countries that have similar problems as ours and have found certain solutions for them. Owing to this project, we established our contacts with the EMI and we're organizing regional meetings. I'd like to thank the trade unions because since the very beginning of organizing these meetings, they have been our partners and we can talk in a constructive way on these very sensitive topics. Let me cover a couple of points. I'm glad that Mr. YANEV is here. We have worked with him when he was director of the InvestBG agency. We have been talking about Stara Zagora and what can happen there, and the just transition. The just transition mechanism will be another topic on which we will discuss matters with them. On the regional level, we're quite concerned with the comments that in addition to these 3 regions that have been mentioned in the assessment of the European Union, Stara Zagora is one, Haskovo, Sliven, and Yambula, the other 3 areas, satellite areas or regions. So in these actually 6 regions, that is 6 plus 5 more that we intend to add because they have strong carbon economies. I'd like to say that we don't quite agree with the pillars. Pillar 1, the fund focuses on a region like Marica Istok. Regarding the other 5 regions, and not only 5, because the Govish, the Gabrovo, Varna, Burgas regions, which have their kindred regions in other EU countries, we know that the Green Deal also affects transport, energy efficiency, and so on. There are sufficient funds under InvestEU and programs that every member state should implement. So there are funds that have been allocated to them. We need, though, very clear distinction among the funds that are focused in this respect. 13 sectors will be covered, but what is to happen in Stara Zagora will not happen in any other region. And I think that this is clear to all of us. According to Mr. Totu Mladenov's report, about 21,000 people are the affected individuals and their family members. As to what should be done and the staff issue, I appeal to Mr. YANEV and Mr. ENG that we are talking about targeted measures. There is a letter of the Deputy Minister of Economy for showing interest in the so-called European digital hubs. Until the 23rd of October, requests of this type should be filed. We are ready to do so in Stara Zagora. Industrial zone Zagora is the first step in solving the issue of generation and attracting investments, even though, as Mr. Zagorov said, the energy sector will not release people. We have launched an initiative for creating a laboratory for virtual reality. It is part of the Thrace University. The purpose is to establish such a hub and train people in this area. As regards manpower, we have shortage of manpower. Even now, the business has long emphasized the need for reskilling, for example. Under Erasmus Plus, we are creating programs to reskill people occupied in mining to RES jobs. So on a regional level, we are a partner that is highly interested in this transition. This transition should not be a clash, a collision. It should be an opportunity for a new and better, cleaner future. Thank you, Madam Grozova. This is a very interesting set of examples from the Stara Zagora region. I believe they can be used in other regions too. These are examples of cooperation between the institutions and the other stakeholders. I would like to remind you that you can send your questions online through Slido. The number is 44693. There are already questions. We will pose them to the speakers in the course of the discussion. Now, we continue with the topic of regions. We continue with Mrs. Kristina Lazarova, who is the co-founder of the platform Brown to Green. I believe she will also quote interesting examples. Hello. I thank the organizers from EMI for this opportunity to be here, for me to be here. I'd like to thank them for inviting the Brown to Green platform to participate in the platform, in the conference. What happens in Kyustendil and Pernik did not begin in December. What happens there is something that people are aware. People are aware that the quality of coal there is not as required. And the resource that is available and will be available in the years to come will not be sufficient for more than 7 or 8 years of operation of the power plants there. Initially, we did not have a common organization. On the 7th of April, though, our brown to green platform was established, and I'm the co-founder. So the power plant in Bobovdol and in Pernik have become members of this platform. We established this platform after a number of meetings with various departments of the European Commission, with the MPs, that is, members of the European Parliament, including representatives of the office of Mr. Timmermans. We wanted to be aware of what the situation is in Europe. Europe launched its journey along the independent energy sectors just because they needed to. We know what is being done in Germany and in other countries that are quite advanced in this area. And we understand why they wanted to increase the targets percentage-wise. What I can say about Bulgaria from my observations is in line with what Mr. Ivanov said. We don't have an overall concept and vision. We work piecemeal. It's very difficult for us to perform our activities, but we are performing them jointly with the institutions, even though it is very hard, very difficult to achieve good results. We don't have synergy. We don't have a clear and precise plan. We tried to draft such a plan on a local level. We have the exit date. We have information about what will happen on site. We have a very harsh plan. What will happen to the people, how the two sites will be transformed. Of course, this process will be staged, and we have a plan as to what can be situated by way of new manufacturing there. We have carried out talks with quite a number of international companies. I don't believe that Bulgaria is not a friendly place. I think that we are not holding the proper talks with these companies, including on the government level. I think that the government, the state, should consider using the mechanism of financing the new RES capacities, that is the transfer of capacity from one state to another state. This is very important. Our Greek counterparts are moving in this direction. They are in a very advanced level of negotiations with PPC, and which is their company, and the German company RB. So we do have our plan. We are trying to share it with the institutions. It's difficult to reach the good results there. Let me repeat what Mrs. Grozova said. We also believe that the first pillar concerns for very highly carbon-intensive regions. Initially, only Stara, Zagora, and Kyustendil were referred there, but after discussions with the office of Mr. Timmermans and letters, Pernik was added, and then the other three regions were added at a later stage, even though they are indeed very highly affected. We should talk about the Green Deal not as if it is something negative. People say, well, the consequences, the negatives from this deal. Well, I can say that our sector is in an absolute collapse. That is, it is in a very hard state. We have to see the Green Deal from the positive side, from the perspective of transforming our sector. In Bulgaria, we are talking only about the first pillar, probably because there are grants there. We can also use the other pillars. We can use InvestEU also for attracting investors from other countries to be based here. We have had talks with such potential investors, and they have the desire to move over here if there is the right climate. We have had talks with the Ministry of Energy. We have expressed our views, and we hope that further talks will be held. What matters to us is, and I refer you to the words of Mr. Stanislav Ivanov, that gas is not panacea, but natural gas is a fuel that can lead to the panaceas that Europe is trying to impose, like hydrogen, for example. What we can use to replace one of the installations offered by our company to use fired by natural gas and coal. There are many options, but they have to be considered. Finally, I'd like to say that apart from the just transition mechanism, we should use all kinds of other financial instruments, non-financial mechanisms. Polska is the third biggest coal mining region in Poland. Instrat is their think tank. We established collaboration with them. Life Plus is the program that finances this program. The idea is how this region is to be transformed.
Thank you, Ms. Lazarova. We heard about the regional perspective from various sides. There is so much unclarity. If we looked into the regions, not only from the point of view of energy, but generally, energy-intensive regions, in fact, proved to be under threat. Next will speak Mr. Todorov, member of the National Expert Council on Climate Change to the Minister of Environment and Water. Let's discuss the National Energy and Climate Plan, where on which actually the Commission has suggested some recommendations regarding air quality and some other issues. Let me just mention that the Council is representing NGOs. I have been in the energy policy area for numerous years, and I represent an NGO that has been involved in improving energy quality. Let me start with the question, who is afraid of the Green Deal? What we heard from our colleagues earlier today actually shared some views that I'm prepared to agree with. For instance, that the business is at a loss, meaning there is no governmental plan to guide our way towards the future. Let me give you an example. A decision dated 31st of January 2020 of the National Assembly that Mr. Nekov claimed to be anti-constitutional. I would say it is more than that. It's anti-European. Maintaining the coal sector, irrespective of the European Commission views. We are in a 2-year delay, simply because we are afraid of trade union organized protests. There are numerous other examples. In fact, the main issue that I agree on with the previous speakers is that we lack vision. The decision of the National Assembly that I mentioned is actually the attempt of the ruling party to move away from resolving this issue before the upcoming elections. The missing vision sets the foundation of corruption practices implemented. It opens the door for instance, wasting money on numerous senseless projects. The closure of the Bulgarian energy holding in fact would stop this money wasting and actually going in sort of a quick sense. As for the National Energy and Climate Plan, it clearly stipulates that incentives should be granted to support energy transition of coal mining regions. But nothing more about incentives. What type of incentives? We cannot have a successful transition. We cannot expect to receive grants from EU. Somebody mentioned 90 million euros, but they will not be granted. They will be allocated on a competitive basis. Our impression is that all decisions in the energy sector are made in closed doors, and they are not transparent. They are not a matter of or resulting from a dialogue between the stakeholders, the business, government, NGOs. We have a tripartite council that should be the forum where energy decisions should be taken. And sometimes some economic councils actually give recommendations that are definitely out of place and cannot be more far away from reality. So in that sense, I urge the use of cooperation between all stakeholders. Experts should be used, but the opinions should be shared on equal footing. I have written 4 pages of recommendations regarding the National Energy and Climate Plan, but I didn't get even a thank you response. So communication is in the dire need of improvement. Thank you, Mr. Todorov. With respect to questions, I remind everyone, slide.com, use the code 44679. 693, sorry. And now let me pass on to Mr. Boyan Rashev. Let's hear some figures. Let's be brief in order to stick to the time frame. Good morning. I don't have too much time for figures. Let me be very brief. We're talking about the Green Deal and what it's all about. This is not a process that dates back to yesterday. These policies have been lingering for 30 years now, but we are going to the next level, a sort of an utopia. If I have to define what the Green Deal is all about, it's imposing the priorities of the French coast, Mediterranean coast on all of Europe. With respect to environment, the Green Deal and the climate policies as a whole have a very interesting impact because, for instance, air pollution in Bulgaria, who is the main polluter? In winter, it is burning of coal and wood. How could this polluter be restricted? It can be limited if we have a relatively low-priced heating methods via natural gas, via electricity, or via other sources, but what we have witnessed so far is that the prices of electricity are creeping up. So, what is currently the situation? Would it was considered RES, but the policies currently put in place lead to people polluting more. Another issue regarding environment, we know how important Maritsa Istok facilities are to our economy, but they need gradually to phase out. However, what the order should be, or what the procedure should be, which one of them is producing the cleanest energy, because there are so many requirements. How do we know that it is clean energy? There are various criteria and indicators. There is a single indicator, what type of gypsum and ashes are generated from the electrostatic filters. You're not measuring emissions, but you are measuring the waste generated. And the waste actually gives you a very clear picture of the situation. So for the TPPs, in fact, that we need to phase out actually are the most modern one in the country. I listened very carefully all the presentations of yesterday's session, and Ms. Dilovska presentation was very clear. We need to invest so much in the grid, in the electricity grid, that it's uncomparable to anything we invested before in energy sector. She mentioned some figures. And actually, this toy will be so expensive that the electricity price will be very high. This is currently the case in Germany, where the electricity price for households reached close to 32 euro cents per kilowatt. So just consider when electrification can be achieved, unless it is imposed, in fact enforced. And finally, with respect to hydrogen, we are preparing a project to be funded by the European Investment Fund. The idea is to capture CO2 from cement production, and also the PV generated one and use it for green plastics production. A pilot project probably will be implemented relatively soon, but before 2030, we cannot think of having a feasible facility constructed and operational. In other words, hydrogen is a very good idea, but for the time being, it is just an idea. As for hydrogen use, the way it is required to be used, we need time. There are lots of there is lots of potential options for Bulgaria. For instance, we are not using the Danube River as an energy source, but we'll discuss that at a later stage. Thank you, Mr. Rashev. Now, let's hear Mr. Yulian Popov. He is the director of the Energy Efficiency of Buildings, or Buildings Energy Efficiency Institute. He will be online afterwards. We will pass back the word to STAMEN YANEV to respond to the questions from the audience and from online. Mr. Popov, you have the floor, sir.
We can't hear. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for the fact that you have organized this meeting. In recent time, when such conferences are held, we say that they are very timely. But when we talk about the Green Deal, as already mentioned, this is not something that is taking place now. It's a long process, and the lack of specific plans and policies is an issue. Their drafting and debate had to start at the time of launching the emissions trading. In the beginning, the price of the emissions was about 30 euro per ton. So 15 years ago, these were the initial prices. The idea was for these prices to persist. Then the economic crisis broke out, as well as other factors that reduced the prices. But the reduction of the prices for everyone was temporary, had a temporary effect. That is, every kind of planning had to take into account emissions that would cost 25 or 30 euro per ton. Many analysts suggested that the energy sector had to draft its plans having in mind prices like 50 to 60 euro. We had to develop different scenarios with different prices, 10, 20, 100, in order to be ready for all circumstances. Bulgaria is lagging behind in this respect. So we have to catch up by carrying out parallel processes. One of the factors that has not been mentioned so far, I believe, is the opening of the market. And this is very important for the Green Deal. Bulgarian energy sector is part of an open market. From a market perspective, we are losing our energy sovereignty. 2 or 3 years ago, we wanted to close our market and say we will not sell, we will not buy. This was, of course, this was heavily criticized. Now, for example, this is a different situation. Bulgaria is now importing electricity from Turkey. Why? Not because we are not paying for emissions there. The Turkish energy generation is over 50% RES. So Turkey can import in Bulgaria or export to Bulgaria such electricity that is energy neutral. Last year, 36 euro per megawatt hour was the price at the spot market of Turkish electricity. As the lira lost its part of its value, now it is the cost is 25 euro. The Bulgarian figure is 36. So at the border of Bulgaria, we have cheaper electricity. So this should not be associated with the fact that Turkey is not paying for carbon emissions. Now, as for Germany, let us forget about what the end consumer is paying The spot market in Bulgaria had 36 euro as average price last year. When we look at the price of electricity in Germany, we should ask ourselves, well, where do we stand? We stand between Germany and Turkey at a market which generates electricity at considerably lower prices in the open market, the spot market, compared to Bulgaria. To my mind, this is a key point on which we should focus, which we should consider. This is my first point. My second point, which is a short one, concerns Maritsa Istok. It was mentioned here that we should take Greece as an example when we develop Maritsa Istok. The whole Greek strategy is largely based on ideas and research concerning Maritsa Istok. So they took the Bulgarian example. But politically, we are not moving things forward. This is another matter. And finally, another very big issue that was mentioned several times in relation to the strange parliamentary decision to preserve the coal industry. This decision has something else involved in it. The opposition of the different types of energy stations. In the future, we have to integrate mines, the other power plants, but also IS, which is a global leader. The efforts of all these stakeholders have to be pooled. If we need to seek an investor in this strategic investor in this area, we have this investor on our territory. I'm not bound financially or in any other time with these power plants, but I believe that they have to be involved. Definitely, the Green Deal is an option for transformation of the Bulgarian economy as we have dreamed about. Whether we will make use of this option opportunity is another point. Thank you, sir. The topic of electricity is very interesting. If you consider the draft of the energy strategy in all these scenarios, you will see that sustainable export of from Bulgaria is envisaged of 8 terawatt-hours per annum. So we should discuss this too. We continue now with Mr. STAMEN YANEV's response, the Deputy Minister of Economy, and we also have questions, one from Georgiev Stefanov, I believe it is from WWF, how the Ministry of Economy works with other ministries regarding the allocation of the funds from the EU and what percentage of emissions reduction we should expect until 2030. Thank you, Associate Professor Georgiev. It's a cascade of questions. Actually, we can say that there are 2 questions embedded in one from Mr. Stefanov. Let me start with the second one. If Mr. Stefanov is interested in whether we know what is taking place on a European level, I can say that we are very closely following the process. We have undertaken the commitment for 40%. The European Parliament supported the desire of reducing the harmful emissions by 60%. On the 23rd of October, there will be a session of the European Council in the format of the Ministers of Environment. and water, because in Bulgaria our ministry is responsible both for the environment and for water. Regarding the allocation of the funds, the Ministry of Economy is part of a group of different formats. The main working group or task force is that chaired by the Vice Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister Tomislav Donchev. The Ministry of Energy has appointed Mr. Zhechu Stankov as the chairperson. Hence, we can conclude what the operation of this task force is. There is yet another task force under the Ministry of Environment and Water. This is a task force on the development and implementation of strategic documents regarding circular economy. Certain doubts were expressed regarding the vision and the activities on the Green Deal. Let me remind you that we are developing a national plan under the Recovery Resilience Fund. As we become part of the Hydrogen Alliance, we have had certain options open for us. We have about 40 projects that have been submitted. We expect them to be considered and possibly financed, and they concern the introduction of hydrogen technology. So we have also projects drafted in the area of just transition. So we are ready with specific concrete steps. This is indeed a process, as it has been mentioned here, and as any other process, it is expected that the results would be the outcome of careful consideration. And this process should also involve action, intensive action. Hence, we are at the disposal of all stakeholders. We maintain constant contacts with the business. We heard here about the action we have taken in view of the regulation of industrial parks and technological parks. I would say that jointly with the current minister, I, as part of his team, have suggested, made proposal in connection with the establishment of industrial parks that attention should be paid to offering opportunities to everybody in the industrial parks to use green energy, to use the residual products from recycling lines of production, and that through the industrial parks we should implement initiatives that are part of what we now term circular economy. This is a process. Let me repeat that. As any process, it probably involves certain mistakes or mismatches, but the direction is clear. In view of the whole situation of the economy in this country now, and in view of the COVID crisis, I'd like to quote what a big Bulgarian writer said, Ivan Radichkov. One is not always where his hat is. And when there is confusion, and in our situations there is always confusion, one cannot understand what is under each hat, what stands, what exists under each cap. I'm using this quote from the works of Radichkov in order to throw a bridge and with our time and say that we should probably use various non-traditional means of operation, of work, of cooperation. But in order to have our tomorrow, we have to create it today. And this has to do with certain painful processes. I wish success to the conference. Thank you for the invitation. We are taking heed of all the comments that have been made. And as I mentioned, in the course of our joint work on the move, we will provide solutions to the problems. Thank you for your attention. Once again, I wish productive work of the conference, which is drawing to its end. I believe that from this point onwards, we will set the beginning of certain sustainability, stability related to the conclusions, proposals of this conference. And as we normally say, let's hope that this will be the platform for future joint action. Mr. Deputy Minister, there is a question concerning circular economy. Can you please comment on it? I will read it verbatim. I'll read it.
I will integrate the circular economy's principles, waste management and waste to energy projects. Ако желаете да коментирате това и също така само ще ви помоля да разясните с две думи това, което споменахте, че вече работите по регионални планове. Всъщност с кого работите? Благодаря.
You mentioned that you work on different... what are your partners in your joint work? The first question, indeed, circular economy will become a priority of the transformed or revised strategy for intelligent specialization, indeed smart specialization. This is a priority in the next programming period. Projects will be financed then. I would refer you back in time, as this will be a specific action. It's about regulation 651 from 2014. State aid cannot be provided to projects related to the processing and treatment of waste. And projects for the generation of electricity from various renewables. This should probably be reconsidered. It should be revised because it concerns the issue of state aid, which is in the field of competence of the European Union. But it sets the framework within which we, as a state, can incentivize and support certain private initiatives in this area. At present, we are holding talks with various companies that are willing to invest in this area. But you know how delicate and sensitive the topic of waste collection is, the topic of the treatment of this waste. We even had international investigation regarding how this activity is performed in the best way, in the most lawful way. So this is also part of the action program or action plan. Regarding the specific regional plans, the funding will come from the EU. The procedure should identify the contractor. The funding comes from the EU, and when we have a specific entity to work with, we will enable every one of you to familiarize themselves with the process and contribute to the final result we are willing to achieve. Hopefully, I have been exhaustive. So we are at your disposal, let me repeat, to discuss this topic in the future as well. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Minister. I know that you need to leave. I just wanted to inform you on behalf of the Institute that according to our old tradition, we always draft a summary of the conference because there are other questions that are addressed to the Ministry of Economy, which we cannot handle now. We will send them to you in additionally, and we will be glad to upload your responses to the website of the conference. Thank you once again for having attended this conference and having been here together with us. Of course, we will answer each of these questions. I believe that both questions and replies are debatable. The very fact that at European level there are hesitations and doubts as to what the percentage should be, what vision should be approved. This places each of us in a difficult situation. We should not be very definite in our formulations, in our questions and answers. Mr. Borisov, Minister of Economy, likes to talk about synergy a lot. I think, in line with what he has said, that the synergy of all the entities in this process, of all the stakeholders, should exist in order to ensure the attainment of the desired results. Thank you, sir, for attending this panel.
Let's move on. Please use the code Slido 44693. Put your questions there. We will make sure to respond to them. Angela Tonova, you have the floor, ma'am. We are now opening the floor for discussion. I have a particular question to Mr. Ivanov, who is the chairperson of the Regulatory Commission, regarding the role of power distribution networks. Do you plan to have a change in the regulatory legislation associated with the statement yesterday, 80% of RES generated energy to join the grid, and giving an example of the UK, where all stakeholders were involved in making this decision. The British regulator started to work on this change 10 years ago. So what would be your approach? Would you follow the British approach? Thank you, Ms. Donova. Associate Professor Ivanov, you need to collect additional questions. Are there any other questions addressed to the regulator? My question would be regarding investments. What do you believe should be invested in the power distribution network and power transmission networks when we talk about such a perspective for up to 2030? First of all, I would like to extend my gratitude to the organizers because the topics that we consider are very important. I believe that the European Green Deal is of importance not only for Bulgaria but for the entire EU. When arranging the priorities of a society, it goes without saying that the human life, human health and environment are top priority. Even though it might be hard to achieve them, the goal is very clear and very humane. In other words, the implementation of the Green Deal is very crucial. Even in the recent days, the European Parliament voted on 60% reduction in CO2 emissions by 2030. Even Mr. Timmermans, the Vice President of the Commission, mentioned how hard it would be to achieve this goal. Secondly, Bulgarian energy problems are compiling and accumulating simply because for many years, systematically, we've been lagging behind in implementing some European policies, somehow striving to maintain the status quo. Why? For various reasons. Some justified, others not. So there is a load of reforms that need to be implemented. First of all, the mindset of people defining the energy policy in Bulgaria should change. Bulgaria is put in a less competitive and less favorable environment regarding energy. Now, the role of the regulator. In the course of the years, and with respect to the Green Deal, first of all, and most of all, the regulator abides by the law and the relevant legislation and the energy strategy of the country. However, the delay that I mentioned earlier is reflected in the draft of the new energy strategy of the country. We don't find a response to the questions: where are we going, what we want to achieve by 2050. And we are witnessing new projects, new NPPs, the 7th unit in Kozloduy NPP, or brand new nuclear power plant. Uh, Somehow chaotic with respect to the regulator. I will respond to the question of Ms. Angela Toneva, a question that was raised yesterday in the presentation of Ms. Dilovska. I was not present here yesterday, but I listened to the online broadcasting. With respect to the transmission and distribution networks, the distribution networks will be in the focus of the energy transition. I disagree. Under the European Green Deal, as well as in other legislative pieces, in the core of energy transformation lie consumers. And this is indeed the case. And this is simply because of all the opportunities provided to energy customers. Tariff change. In the European Union, there are countries, the network tariff are based on the network itself, not only transmitted energy. In Bulgaria, we apply the second on the basis of transmitted energy. Ms. Toneva, Ms. Dilovska talk about a different design. The costs of maintaining a network are constant and should not depend on the quantity of energy transmitted. Secondly, and for natural gas, for it, this approach is applied. But I would like to emphasize some counter arguments, contradictory arguments. Whenever we discuss the issue with European regulators, our counterparts, when tariffs are formed on the principle of green capacity, even the countries where this is applied wanted to move away, to shift away from it on the basis of surveys and research, simply because such a design, when applied to households with minimum consumption, will be the most affected. I'm not talking about the summer houses used for a short period of time in the course of a year. I'm talking about consumers living in villages that use only for light purposes electricity or just a fridge. So they will be the most affected. Secondly, by stimulating, not with preferential prices, for personal use from RES, one of the factors incentivizing such a development is that they will not pay for network tariffs. They would have them in different situations. When you have an RES generation, they need to have a green capacity. My personal view of what could the regulator do about it, I believe that we will reach to a hybrid model. Don't forget that it is the role of the regulator to account for the public interest and to protect public interest. In other words, the network tariffs design will start to change, and we will look for a balanced solution. Let me move on. Just allow me just a few more sentences. Next, another thing that has been rather extensively commented, even addressed to us in written form. What is the Commission doing regarding REMIT and REMIT regulation application? Very recently, we received a formal statement from the four employers' organization. REMIT rules are very specific, and when they are poorly understood and interpreted, we are faced with a problem. These rules represent a part of our energy legislation. There is a dedicated unit on REMIT, but there are certain very categorical requirements. There is no information regarding investigations. First stage is collecting information and preliminary analysis, and then reported to the Commission with recommendation that can go two ways, either proceed further or terminate the investigation. And the second stage refers to investigation if the exchange rules are violated. When a decision is made by the Commission, this decision is not made public. And this is for a reason, simply because this decision is subject to appeal before a Bulgarian court. And if the Commission points to a particular company for being an abuser or violator of the rules, and the Court of Appeal rules against, what could be the outcome? And however, ACER, or the Association of EU Regulators, this association is notified upon initiating an investigation. So it is not possible at the first stage to make the decision public. So any alerts received in the Commission are subject to investigation following the relevant stages mentioned earlier. With respect to market development, Mr. Yulian Popov mentioned that there is no doubt the energy market in Bulgaria should be liberalized. It should be a free market. But the first step is to amend the law. I'm sure you're aware of the final amendments of the legislation. I'm sure that you're aware that small non-household consumers are now using the free market options. And the European Commission instructed us on that. Now, however, this is not happening. Actually, we are witnessing now sort of a reversed action. Some non-household consumers that were operating on the free market now return back to the regulated market. In this situation, the Commission did what it is entrusted to do. First, we published a list of all electricity traders. They all were advised to choose a trader within a 3 months period. Then the Commission, third, the Commission provided a template for a contract with a current supplier. However, this supplier operates, is a trader, is no longer obeying the regulated market rules, and they have a timeline within which they needed to choose electricity trader. So the Commission intends to analyze the situation and provide a report on all the dates, all the data and updates regarding the use of power traders. So now non-household consumers have the option to use currently the so-called supplier of last resort. I'm not aware whether the information available to the household consumers are aware that in the first half of next year, 2021, they need to move towards the free market. They need to meet certain criteria. And I believe that with this next move, the regulated market will deal only with energy disadvantaged households. I believe that Bulgaria will take the best advantage if it follows the requirements of the Green Deal. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sir, these are indeed very comprehensive topics, and we cannot avoid what is taking place in the market. There is one question concerning regions addressed to Mrs. Kristina Lazarova and Mrs. Grozeva, Rumiana Grozeva. But first, Mr. Stara, you have the floor. Thank you, Mr. Georgiev. I shall express a more interesting opinion on the matter of the Green Deal. It is supplement to what Mr. Boyan Rashev said a while ago. The whole policy of the Green administration in Brussels rests on the statement that carbon dioxide and anthropological activities are underlie the climate change in the Earth. But 31,487 scientists from the US, they are academicians, professors, doctors, they oppose this statement, including IT specialists. The statement that carbon dioxide alters the climate is based on computer software. This statement is not science proved. Not only these 31,000 scientists, but also scientists from China, Russia, Canada, Australia, and other big states support the idea that this is not a scientific explanation of climate change. There is a statement, an opinion by Mrs. Mary Hutzer, objected against before a Senate commission. And 1.4 million European families are expected to become energy poor. And the problems for clean energy in Europe did not reduce the emissions, but increased the prices, increased the sovereign debt, drove away business, increased unemployment, fraud, and corruption. And I would add that in Australia, as far back as 2012, they introduced emissions trading. But 2 years later, on the 14th of July 2014, the Australian Parliament voted for removing this tax on emissions trading. The Prime Minister said today this tax is removed because it is a useless, harmful tax. It is detrimental to the families and does not help the environment. Its repeal will save about $9 billion annually. The citizens of Australia found that this tax has led to growing prices, higher unemployment, higher income tax, and additional regulation and control. Companies have laid out a lot of workers because of this tax. And to UK scientists, Dr. Hughes, Gordon Hughes, is an economy professor in Edinburgh, and Mr. Constable is the head of a renewable energy foundation. They say the offshore projects developed and planned in northwestern Europe are close to the speculative development of ownership. They are high-risk projects that can be able to repay the loans, provide return to their investors in shares only if the average wholesale prices of electricity are increased, mind you, at least 3 or 4 times compared to their current levels in the whole Northwest Europe. This could happen if the market price of gas goes up and becomes times higher, or if the taxation of carbon emissions goes up to an 8 step until it becomes about 200 euro. You can send these quotes. Just give us the summary of your position. What will happen to Bulgaria after 2025 if the Mini Maritsa Istok and the 3 power plants discontinue their operation? What will they be replaced with? Will that be wind or solar parks? Yesterday, one of the speakers, Dr. Rickett, said something very important. Not only the area of Maritsa Istok should be covered with photovoltaics, but hundreds of thousands of the fertile Thracian land should be covered with these photovoltaic panels, and they will not be able to replace the energy that is generated now, including in winter times. So we're losing a cheap source of electricity, and now we're inviting experts or investors to come to this country. In Germany, investors say to the government, if the price of electricity goes up, we will leave the country and we will go to countries that have neutral position in this respect. But they will not come to Bulgaria because the Bulgarian position will be the same as that of Germany. The deputy ministers yesterday and today said that Bulgarian industrialists are also considering moving their operations to neighboring countries like Turkey, Macedonia, Serbia. So in Bulgaria, we will have a huge surplus of manpower. We're losing our advantage of cheap electricity, but we will have cheap manpower, which will leave the country and go to Western Europe or other countries where they will be better paid. So Bulgaria will face yet another national disaster. It loses cheap energy, fertile land, and young people in the active age that could contribute with their taxes and could boost the development of the state. And what will happen to the retirees? Thank you. A comment and projection. The prices of electricity have long changed from what they used to be. So this advantage is already lost. You're an optimist that the first changes in Bulgaria regarding the coal sector will be 2025. I believe that the basic for the basic scenario, 5 years is too long a period. Mr. Nekov.
What I want to raise as question, not only to address to Mr. Sterev, we are aware of all the arguments regarding a lack of qualified personnel. Will the coal survive the impact from the aspect of European single market? Let's leave the topic, the environmental issue aside for a moment. Purely from economical perspective, coal are the painful topic. Let's focus on a regional development, the development of regions from the perspective of the Green Deal, because the Green Deal is not about energy alone, not about coal alone. Please, I urge you to share your comments from purely economic perspective. These trends, both at EU level and global level, indicate that coal has an economic problem. Apart from political economic problem, they have another problem. Let's try and see how this reflects into the social element as well. Any other questions? Mr. Popchev. I have 2 or 3 comments. I would like first to congratulate the EMI for the topic. The first thing I need to share is the social sustainability and continuity. Without public debate, we cannot move forward. This debate has not started as yet. I would change the title of this event into first debate on the Green Deal. Let's have this debate on TV. Make it public. Let's start from the designers of the Green Deal. From the formulation of Jean-Michel is the transformation, energy transition, economy transformation, and remodeling, and society remodeling, social remodeling. When we're talking about remodeling, it's about citizens. Everybody that hears the words transition and remodeling actually gets scared from it. We need to very smoothly project the idea. My perception from all the discussions that take place on TV is that everybody on TV speaks from the perspective of a final resort competent person. The information should be filtered in order to convey the message in the proper manner. Secondly, very simplified is the vision that dwells at governmental level. We have a very good thermal power stations with new technologies implemented. They cleaned it up as much as possible. But those 3 or 4 megawatt capacities, we will replace them in 10 or 15 years with 2 or 3 nuclear power capacity. It's not that simple. The public needs to know that the Green Deal does not foresee any investment in nuclear power, not in new ones. If we are a good steward of our capacities, we intend to move away from all the investments allocated for RES and look for 10 or 20 billions from investors for nuclear power station. The public needs to be aware of this. When we speak about an objective debate, our engineers, knowledgeable engineers, state that we have coal reserves for 60 years. But sun will be there for over 60,000 years. A survey was published some time ago. Actually, it was way back, before 1989, for the entire territory from Berlin to Vladivostok and from north to south. Bulgaria and Georgia are the countries, and Georgia, sorry, Bulgaria and Georgia will have ample amounts of solar energy. How is it possible that European countries produce PV energy at a very low price, close to 1 euro cent per watt energy? We are a very small market, and this should be the topic of finding consortia approaches in order to have the price drop. And finally, it's about the vision of the government to make sure the entire territory of the country is covered by the vision. It's about implementing the Green Deal all across the country in all its dimensions, not only energy dimension, but all other aspects. This cannot happen without system engineers. Engineers, experts in system management. Whether this is at regional level or agency level, plans are made to cover the scope of the entity. In Bulgaria, since 2015-2016, we have a RES scheme implemented. So, what's the capacity? What is the capacity that has been supported under this scheme? I know that the figure is 0. It's quite reasonable to assume that it is 0. So why is it 0? With respect to the criteria that the coal reserve will last for 60 years, but if we reduce the production by half, we'll have 420 years. So how would you comment on this statement? Svetozar Zakhariev is my name, and I work on a capacity facility that deals with waste management. And I can state that coal can be together with waste. And this is feasible, this is doable if we work properly with the facilities and with the employees. We heard about the investment plans, but then again, we will end up in a situation where we are in delay. Yet again, Bulgaria has sufficient waste to use it in a proper manner. There are countries that are prepared to import it, use it, and there are so many options for Bulgaria to use coal in a mix to be able to generate clean energy. A question.
Not work energy from waste booster, biogas, biofuels, energy production, etc.
Ами, защото малко са държавите в света, които имат...
Simply because there are a few countries in Europe that have R&D in that area. We know that there are regional waste deposits, waste landfills, but not regions can afford to build facilities to generate clean energy. There are locations in Bulgaria where waste can be used, but there are others that do not have the capacity. With respect to hazardous waste, Let me give you an example. Pesticide waste. We exported it in order to have it processed and treated, but we have the capacity to do it here in the country. Ms. Groz, I will work on the coal issues. Lignite do not have a future in Bulgaria under the current policy and under the current carbon prices, carbon allowances prices. Mixing them. Let me give you an example. In the UK, let me give you an example. In the UK, they import waste from the UK and from the Nordic countries, and together with coal, they produce clean energy, brick. For instance, residues from waste management plants are left unused. Why don't we do it? Simply because in a society there is sort of a craziness dwelling or fear that it pollutes the environment, and this is stupid, to put it bluntly. There is a Vienna company that is providing the heating the country. It's a mix, cogeneration. And don't tell me that it is polluting simply because Vienna, for instance, is one of the cleanest cities in Europe. Stockholm applies the same approach. This hysteria that disseminated in the public space regarding waste import was absolutely without proper grounds. Why don't we use our waste? I wanted to comment on something else. There are two questions online. What is the role of the state in the future transition? A process that needs to start from Stara Zagora and from southwest Bulgaria. Mr. Rashev and Mr. Sterev, I want to address a question to you. The role of the state, it goes without saying, that it's a leading role. Without the state, we cannot do anything. Just like the European Commission is setting the framework, at national level we need to have a framework. The role of the state is to be a partner, an active partner. I cannot separate environment from economy. The Green Deal is about environment. Your example that you gave was rather irrelevant. Europe is not imposing anything on us. Bulgaria is a sovereign country. If Bulgaria wants to defend its lignite production, it should have done it, even through the platform of coal regions in transition. Europe cannot impose anything on us if we have the will, the skills, and the ability to defend it. Anything else is irresponsible and an irresponsible deception of our citizens. Furthermore, with the issue about wasting, about burning waste, the public is not aware of what energy could be generated from that. We are spending billions in purchasing carbon emissions. But it's about corruption. Corruption also means to take a stance on something that you are incompetent in. I believe we need to convey a message to the next generation. We somehow are hypocrisy or Hippocratic stance, just like hiding our head behind the problems. We cannot speak about jobs at the moment. Nobody wants to close down the employment opportunities tomorrow. But if we want to work with a 30 years perspective, then we need to start today. Ms. Lazarova. I just don't want to reiterate the words of Ms. Grozeva. I concur everything she said. First, a Green Deal at a regional level is a huge problem because we are a very much centralized countries. So things need to be reversed on a stage-by-stage basis. I can see what happens in Pernik. There, the district governors and mayors, they want to do something very serious to stabilize their regional economy. And this is faced with troubles and difficulties. What they say, we want very much to do it, but they need to have a permission from the top. There is no strategy, there is no this, there is no that. I can hear this all the time. What they want at regional level is to provide opportunities and some incentives to the investors and companies that come to the region and want to operate there. There should be a very serious public debate, and I agree entirely with the words of Mr. Popchev. There should be a public debate and empowering the regional authorities to be able to work towards the transition. The coal energy is no longer the burden that it used to be. I came across some analysis and surveys stating that the coal-generated energy is the most expensive one. 2 weeks ago, I read about PV generated energy amounting to €11. How can coal compete with such a price? And finally, it is very important for us to liberalize the regulated market in order to introduce the capacity mechanism. The Commission actually demands us to implement it. And we need to work on that It bears also to the transformation. It bears on the transformation of the coal generation of those thermal powered plants. With respect to waste, the moment the word waste or residue is mentioned, we have the prosecutor's office present there. Let's go back to the current situation. Would like to put an emphasis on something. Just we have focused on Europe. Europe is not an example on innovations, example in well-developed economy, and so on. And probably this is the reason we don't find the proper solutions. What is the commitment of the private business regarding innovation? I will give you examples from other countries. Bulgaria has a startup community. We have outsourcing capacities. How many are scholarship, how are the scholarship organized? How many PhD students that plan to work in energy sector? How many are the venture experts working on transformation? We are focused on the Euro funds, but how are things happening in the US, in China? We should not forget that the future involves not only Europe, but global perspective.
Въпрос към тебе.
We have a question to you. Does Overgas plan any investments for building a hybrid gas transmission system that would allow also the transmission of hydrogen? And if yes, what is planned? Can I leave the answer to the question for the end? I first would like to make several comments. It was a very interesting discussion where we heard several times about the government policy. We should not sweep anything under the carpet, as mentioned here, because this carpet is growing and I don't want to fall even on a soft surface. Let's answer what the government policy is today by giving specific examples. First example, there is a government company for trade with liquefied fuels, which is state-owned. Also a holding that will unite all or pool all the water supply companies. If this is state policy, this is not my opinion about it. I would object. There are many other people in the gas community that would join me in opposing this. We are glad that we are part of a segment of the energy where the government, the state, has no involvement at all. So very often we develop even contrary to or despite this policy. You mentioned something about lignites. The fear of what is happening does not stop what is happening. The only way to surmount the fear is to think of how you would surmount the difficulties. As I'm listening to the discussion on how to decide on the future of coal mining in Bulgaria, I have the feeling that we are reading a textbook that has been written a long time ago. In Germany, for example, there is an area, Ruhr, where more than 8 million people live. It is quite densely populated because it is about 5,000 square kilometers. So all this thing happened there. There are textbooks written, and we just need to read these textbooks and apply them under the Bulgarian conditions. The transition there happened in another time, and now we can step up all these processes. When they were talking about this transformation there, about this transition, I witnessed the end of this period. It was clear where the money came from. The money for financing this transition came from the right calculation of every ton of coal generated or mined there. There were pfennigs, the German currency, for the demographic processes, for the restructuring of the employees, for training new specialists and creating new universities even. So it was a comprehensive solution which was arrived at during the process of effective operation of the coal mines. So we need not rediscover the wheel or the hot water. We have this option to consider. Any alternative that will replace the coal and the energy generated by coal will be implemented by people. So it will create alternative jobs. The point is to do it in the most effective way, in the most sustainable way. Like Mr. Ivanov said today, we wake up and our mood is to create a nuclear power plant. Tomorrow we wake up and our mood is different. We decide to do something else. So we should be very well aware of this. A part of the measures to attain the Green Deal is the co-generation of natural gas and hydrogen. The technological decisions of solutions are 10 to 15% of hydrogen. For the Bulgarian condition, on the basis of annual consumption, we can use hydrogen. This is about 400 million cubic meters of hydrogen, which is not much. So we need to get to introduce a shortcut to the end consumer, and this amount of hydrogen can be doubled. So now 15%, in the future probably 30%. And we are also talking about an existing network, even though relatively new, which is a competitive advantage. Mr. Zagorov had a comment. I'll try to be very brief. Just a remark regarding the Council for Mutual Economic Assistance. Young people are not about it. But when we talk about Europe, each policy involves a regional dimension. And there is also a process of association, like the European Energy Union, for example. I have a question to the main organizer to intertwine the topics discussed here with the energy regionality of Europe, because these items should always be taken into account. Thank you. And I thank you. If you have addressed these questions to me too, this was actually one of my focuses, which I have not come to. This is to consider both the regional and the international context, because we have concentrated on what we are doing, what we need to do, but it's very important how the European community of South East Europe should solve these issues. The goals until 2020, the vision, the concept was shared by all, but as regards the horizon until 2030, this debate is yet to be held. This is important in view of the sharing of energy. Also, we have certain realities in the market. The European Union should be competitive globally. So, like shale gas, shale oil, these matters should be considered. We should be part of policy making. We should not be the last chain, the link, and react at the last point of time. Mr. Todorov? I would like to mention something about the waste. It is strange to my mind that waste is considered only as a way of being only for their incineration. We should talk about recycling, separate collection, reuse. In Vienna, Oslo, Copenhagen, there are incinerators, but also in other countries, like in Italy, the 80% is actually used. In Bulgaria, there is a lot of illegal import of waste. We have illegal incineration of waste. The blame here goes to the Ministry of Environment because they issued the permits. So the problem is the illegal, the unlawful import and incineration. But waste should be considered not only as a resource for incineration. Before incineration, we should go through the other stages. Very short remark. I'm not talking about incineration in the way in which we burn coal. I was thinking of recovering waste. This is what I meant. As for imports or exports, that's the matter of the government. I'm just offering a solution. This was not addressed to you. It was addressed to the Ministry of Environment and Water. Associate Professor Ivanov, there are two questions addressed to you. At least one of them concerns you. What are the difficulties in introducing the mechanism of capacity, and the implementation of energy efficiency goal has been implemented to the electricity transmission operators. Thank you.
With respect to the first question, capacity mechanism, some countries have, EU countries have implemented it. They needed to comply with two conditions. First, no long-term contracts and no regulated prices. So if through the energy law we have no more regulated prices, our Commission is prepared to be ready with the proposals for capacity mechanism. As far as long-term energy purchasing contracts are concerned, I believe that we are about to see their end, their completion, 2024. The Ministry of Energy has sent a proposal to Brussels regarding the use of capacity mechanism. Negotiations are on the way. It is Brussels to decide with respect to contracts, long-term contracts, whether Bulgaria will be permitted to implement the capacity mechanism. In my view, it won't be possible. The other question raised is not addressed, is not within the competence of our commission. It is addressed to other governmental agencies. In order to have a sustainable model for energy efficiency, we need to have the adequate and proper legislation. We don't have the proper legislation, so there is no way for the companies to be compensated for the expenses made regarding energy efficiency. On the other hand, it is a must for this to happen. Going back to the hall, Mr. Sterev, please be brief. People took the floor for 2-3 times, and you interrupted. The death of coal mining is decided by the high price of carbon allowances. And carbon allowance prices are decided in Brussels. And let me tell you about the energy prices in some EU countries renowned for their large wind farms and PV farms. Germany, 32%. Average price, €12. Denmark, 21. Belgium, 26. Portugal, cheap energy, 26.4. Ireland, 23.7 euro. In countries where there is no emission trade, Saudi Arabia, Mexico, China, Indonesia, Turkey, the price is less than 10 euro cents. So whether there is a future for the coal in the energy sector obviously depends on Brussels' policy. With respect to natural gas, I believe natural gas will also be subjected to high taxes. After coal comes natural gas and petrol, as mentioned by Brian Ricketts yesterday. So they are doomed. Not only the coal generation is doomed. Anyone that produces expensive energy will produce expensive goods. China this year will burn 4 billion tons. Out of them, half of them will go into goods production. And China will be the only economy marking a growth this year. And Europe will be down by several percentages. The example for Saudi Arabia, even those countries are reconsidering those prices. It's about a political decision, not only market decision. Even they are revising their model of a subsidized price to move towards a model with involving fixed prices, fixed amounts of money provided to each consumer. There was a very interesting analysis regarding the Middle East countries showing that energy efficiency is possible even there with the proper incentives. Mr. Nekov wanted to comment. Mr. Sterov, we go a long way with you. Working for the government, I want to make a principal comment regarding your words. The position of Bulgaria at EU level, it's not only about coal. Bulgaria is a fully fledged member state. Bulgaria has a territory larger than 17 EU member states and a population more than 12 EU member states. So we are neither small, neither big country. We have sometimes problems with defending our position. Today, in the clippings, there is a title after the European Union asked us to decommission NPP units. Now it wants us to close down the coal generation sector. It's not about the commissioners joining together and defining the emission allowance prices. Things look differently. Now, about European energy policy. I have stated on numerous occasions that we have common goals with the European Union, but at national level we have our problems. We need to abide by common rules. There are non-EU member states. They have, for instance, joined EU acquis. But each country is a sovereign country. The green package is not a part of the legislation of the energy community. What bears some relevance to the Green Deal at regional level is associated with projects, common interest projects. But at this stage, in the area of cooperation with non-EU member states, these projects refer to connectivity, natural gas pipelines and power pipelines. These are the projects that in fact will be supported. Some became rather let me say, rather popular. For instance, the interconnection between Bulgaria and Serbia with Greece and so on. Mr. Rashev. Just two comments. Emission allowances trade is a trade. In the European Commission imposed on allocation of the revenues from emission trading into a fund, 25% namely. So it's not precisely trade in the pure sense of the words. Another thing. as final words, sorry, I forgot what exactly I wanted to say as my conclusion. With respect to Bulgaria's position, for decades, Bulgaria signed decisions that actually resulted in the situation we find ourselves now in. And that is a very interesting case. Our European future was so very important, such a big goal that Bulgaria was prepared to sacrifice anything, including the NPP units. But now something interesting is happening, and I wonder what Bulgaria intends to do. Now, the Council of Europe has postponed the decision on the 2030 goal. The European Parliament voted for 60% reduction, but Poland, the Czech Republic, and Hungary didn't vote for that. So the Council has postponed the decision. So if Bulgaria has a proper governmental decision, Bulgaria is keeping silent. But if it is for us, we would prefer to have of 14%. We have had a similar experience with the fourth energy package. Mr. Nekov wants to comment. Just. You mean the Council of Europe or the Council of the European Union? The way decisions are made, obviously, nothing went smoothly and perfectly, but after so many years being EU member states, we have a moral, a legal, and name it, whatever you say, name it, grounds to question what has been done. I was part of the negotiations, Bulgaria joining the EU. I'm not a politician, but in EU member states, having a problem of defending its position is completely different. And since you're talking about NPP units, I feel a bit offended. Simply, I was part of the negotiations in the energy chapter. Kozloduy NPP was the main issue there. And now I'm looking at Antony Ivanov. We became media celebrities yesterday regarding the 7th NPP unit. The nuclear ambitions of Bulgaria became topical recently yet again. Closing down or decommissioning of third and fourth unit was not technically grounded. And after so many years, I can say that it was worth it. I'm not going to comment past things because it's a matter of a long conversation, a multi-layer conversation, starting with our very disregardful attitude to the entire process. Obviously, from technological perspective, we stand on a different position. I would do my best to support everything achieved. With respect to the 7th unit, there are rules in each technology. With respect to nuclear technology, The rules are increased by an order on top. There are rules from the issued by the International Atomic Energy Agency. So we need to be serious about this issue. A new unit would hardly resolve our current problems in the energy X. They will run through a process. Things will happen the way we have set them in advance. For such a unit, we need to perceive it from the perspective of the future, not something that will resolve the problems that have accumulated in the course of the years. I'm a bit of skeptic that the approach we have been using currently will be of any use. Sometimes we confuse things. We speak about module reactors. We speak about the 7th unit, but we're confusing it what type of reactors and so on. What we are discussing now about 2025 and 2030, it's not about new nuclear power units. Associate Professor Ivanov.
Thank you. Regarding the 7th unit at Kozloduy, the normal logic of the law is that if there is a need for big capacity like 1,000 megawatts, the Minister of Energy should develop 3 reports to the Council of Ministers: financial, economic parameters, and energy security. On that basis, the Council of Ministers takes a decision for such construction. What is being done now in almost all countries of the EU when there is a need for big capacity, new big capacity like 1,000 megawatts for meeting the energy needs of a certain country, technologically neutral competition is held, and investors in green energy, in natural gas, operators in the gas sector, they participate in such a competition. In Portugal, there was such a competition. The price was 1 megawatt hour per 1.4 euro, which is less than 3 Bulgarian leva. Whatever you add as network tariffs, this is way below the rest. The rest of the technological options. Let me read some more comments that we have received online. Then we'll have 5 or 6 minutes for further comments. Mr. Yulian Popov, the cutting of subsidies in Germany, will this affect the end price for the users? From a comment to Mr. Nikolov, it's time we stop just debating. You should start creating an actual action plan for progress in Bulgaria. For 20 years, there has been no real policy and cooperation of stakeholders. Time goes by quickly. It will be late in a few months' time. That much on the comments. Last comments. I just want to express my opinion, which is contrary to what you say and Mr. Ashev. It's not true that we are not using the Danube River for hydroelectric power plants. At Kozloduy, we have a hydroelectric power plant, 5 megawatts is the capacity. I apologize for that. Georgi Stefanov, WWF, he adjusts or corrects what Mr. Russia says. He said Bulgaria, together with the Czech Republic, Holland, and Poland, have raised the issue of how the 55% target can be reached if the economy depends on coal. So he is introducing this correction about the official communication or from the European Union. Mr. Popchev, just in brief. First, this may be a blessing in disguise. If you had the conference, if you had held the conference in April, we would not have had these new parameters. Now our minds are set in a different way, especially. My second point, 2 days ago, on the 14th of October, a new foundation was established, Net Zero, an international foundation on climate. It's a small foundation, and it will be glad if the best experts of Bulgarian industry bear in mind their existence. Last call for comments or questions. If there are none, I would like to thank everybody on my behalf. I now turn over to Mr. Nekov for the conclusion. Thank you, Nasko. I will provide a short summary of the 2 days, kind of a wrap-up. As Mr. Popchev mentioned, indeed, operationally and from an objective point of view, matters are quite beneficial because at this point of time, the Green Deal topic is highly debated in Bulgaria and in Europe. And this is very good. We are not making decisions, but we tried to establish a broader platform for this discussion. Let me remind you once again that I will draw up a summary of the event, and it will be made public. Also, this information will be sent out to the institutions. For information, I will send this summary to the European Commission as well, because we're discussing the European Green Deal, and the framework is established on that level. That's why we will inform the European bodies as well. I'd like to formulate 3 major emphases. We're all dependent on the government policy, regardless of whether we approve it or not. The politicians, through the government institutions, set the framework. Legal framework, regulatory framework, with parliamentary instruments that have also been mentioned. Unfortunately, my finding now is that there are quite a few elements of inadequate response on the part of the state, but also there is a lot of lack of transparency. And this is an emphasis that I will especially draw attention to in my conclusions, in my summary. I heard these accents in your speeches too, that new economic entities are created without any justification. Also, there are structures like the Green Council on the Council on Green Deal has been created. They have met just once, and they have not even shaken hands, even though this was the intention. They didn't do so because of the COVID restrictions. There is an inclination of over-administration, like the bill on industrial parks, which was discussed by two parliamentary commissions a couple of days ago. So it has been set up more to serve the state and local authorities than business. So the damages of the proposals that were formulated there can be very detrimental. So the damages can be huge. My second point is about the role of business, of research units, and of the experts, the professionals, the staff in general. The emphasis of government policy that we all depend on should be focused there. And secondly, the role of the NGO in the whole spectrum. The proactive pressure with specific proposals coming from the non-governmental sector should continue. They should be very active. Yesterday, I said something that I will reiterate now. We find ourselves in a situation where the non-governmental sector and the local business and local authorities is much more active. They have wonderful proposals, but there is no national framework where they can submit these ideas and these projects. I personally have a list of such possible projects, and probably you have such lists too. So these are my messages. There is no clarity as to what the state, the government, is doing, what they intend to do, and when. Yesterday, the representative of the European Commission said that until the end of the year, the government has to submit one of the national plans, and we don't yet know what the government, the state is thinking, or let alone what they're working on. I asked the Minister of Economy, the Deputy Minister of Economy, they're working on the regional territorial plans. I asked him whom they are working with in this respect. So these are the main points of my summary. I will take responsibility for what I will write. This will not be a conclusion on the part of the whole conference, but on the part of the moderators and the chairperson. Thank you once again. On behalf of the Energy Management Institute, I would like to thank the Diplomatic Institute for the cooperation. I thank our members and our partner, TODOROV, and I'd like to thank especially the interpreters. I hope we have not tortured them too much. And I would like to thank particularly IDEAS, the company that has provided the logistics, and to those wonderful gentlemen that are hidden behind the heaps of technology that allowed us to have a seamless event. I am quite ignorant technology-wise, but what I understand is that what we are doing now is quite complicated in terms of technology. I thank, million thanks to everyone, and I would like to express the appreciation to the members of the European, of the EMI, those modest ladies who supported this process greatly, and there are two more which are not attending. Thank you very much for having been here so far.